And we're okay. And I have a reading, which I thought you might enjoy, Linda, because it's by Kathleen McTeague, Kaki, who was an intern and I remember her with such fondness, and I hope you do too. This is called On the Cusp of Winter. We've come to the season of waiting. The colors of autumn are gone, leaves faded and fallen, and branches rise bare to the sky. The deep quiet and frozen beauty of winter are coming, but not quite yet. We are in the season in between. The world closes in on itself as breathing things hunker down, excuse me, burrow in, drop to the bottom, and store up nurture for the long cold. Animals that we are, we feel in our bones the shuddering of the windows. Though freed from the need to burrow in, may we still find guidance in the rhythm that beats through our hearts. In this season of waiting, may we let ourselves slow down our pace, ease out from beneath the burden of our speed and bustle, our fretful worry, so that gratitude can saturate our days and color our nights. In this season of closing down, closing in, may our hearts stay open, urging open our doors to the stranger, our hands to the helpless, and our spirits to all that calls us endlessly back to life. So Linda, you're on.
Okay. I was born in Manhattan, New York. It was the only time I've ever been underweight. I was 4 pounds, 10 ounces. I have lots of photographs of me in Prospect Park as a toddler walking around the day before my father went off to serve the Navy in World War II. Mom rented a 2-room apartment next to her parents' apartment. A doorway was put in the shared wall, so between the apartments, so they were connected, and we didn't have to go in the hall to visit each other. I remember going in to saying hello to my grandmother's friends when they came over to play mahjong. The 2-room apartment had a kitchen that ended in a place for a table, and that was where my crib was. The other room was a large living room that had a Murphy bed that came out of the wall when you wanted to sleep. Dad came home from the war, and soon my sister was born. I remembered that night because when my parents went to the hospital, I was put into my grandmother's care. My grandmother said, come to her bedroom. They had twin beds, and I got into bed with Grandma. Grandpa said a few words to me and turned over and went to sleep. At that point in time, he started snoring. Now, this was something I never heard of, and I never heard before. And it wasn't a quiet snoring. It was a very loud snoring and frightened the living daylights out of me. And I remember insisting upon going back to our apartment and getting in the Murphy bed with her and going to sleep. My parents stayed in that apartment building till the late 60s. We moved to a 3-room apartment and then a 4-room apartment, and David and I were married in the living room of the 4-room apartment. I was expected to go see my grandparents every day, which was no problem for me, as they had the only TV between us. I would go visit after dinner because at 7 o'clock every night, Captain Video was on, and I went up to see that. My grandparents also got the New York Times delivered each morning, and my grandfather would read it while smoking a cigar. So on Sunday morning, when it came down to us, so we could read the Sunday edition, You opened up the page and it smelled like cigars. Well, when the New York Times came down, I immediately went to the magazine section and I opened up the puzzle and I tried very, very, very hard to put a word in, maybe even two. And my father was very polite. When he sat down with the puzzle and me looking over, he did everything in the puzzle all around my words before he erased my words and put in what should be there. I remember one time when I was sick, that was the time when if you were sick, you were in bed. You didn't go around and whatnot. You just got in bed and that was where you stayed. And so I remember trying to make crossword puzzles. I don't remember anything about making the crossword puzzles except one. And that was one across was Revolutionary General and one down was a timepiece. And everybody, including my father, put in Washington and watch and had a very difficult time figuring out anything else in that section. And the answers were Cornwallis and clock. And gee, I got so much pleasure out of tricking everybody with that. The elementary school I went to was 9 long blocks from the house. School bus was provided by New York City through the 3rd grade. And for the 4th, 5th, and 6th grades, you were supposed to get to the school on your own. On nice days, I enjoyed the walk. It was really nice and it gave me some quiet time. On the days that weren't so nice, you could get a subway pass, $1 a month. And all you had to do was flash the pass at the person in the desk who was taking the fares for the subway. And you went down and made sure you took a local train because you got on at Church Avenue, didn't get off at Beverly, but it got off at Cortelyou, which was the 3rd one, and you walked to school. Now, today, would we let a 9-year-old do that? I don't think we would, but I did it. My father would give me, in 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, $1 on Saturday. And I'd go down to the local drugstore, which had basically a pharmacy and a luncheonette. Didn't have tables, but it had a bar around it. And you'd sit on stools. And for 30 cents, I got a hamburger and a Coke. And then I went to the movies and I could get in for 25 cents. And I could then get myself some candy or popcorn or whatever I wanted and go see a movie. What happened when I was in high school was on the vacations, the Easter vacation and the Christmas vacation, my father would give me $10 and I would go to Radio City Music Hall in Manhattan, take the subway and go see the Rockettes and whatever movie they were playing. I would, and on Wednesday afternoon, I would go to Broadway, one of the Broadway theaters, and get a $2.90 ticket, which put me up in the last couple of rows of the balcony. And I saw plays. I definitely did not see musicals because my grandmother belonged to a group of women who last Saturday in every month, they went to the theater on Broadway. And when I was old enough to go with them, she would take me to see every musical they went to. So I saw like things like My Fair Lady on Broadway. She'd only take me to the musicals. So when I had a chance to go on Wednesday, uh, I would make sure I didn't go to see musicals. I'd go see Tennessee Williams or something else like that. That was all very good, except I really had a hard time once I left New York City and went to see some plays. If it was Stratford, that was fine. If it was Jiva as it started out, I mean, I was used to Broadway, and I just got impatient. But they've gotten better, and I've gotten less impatient. So it worked out. With my grandfather, I'd go to the Brooklyn Dodgers game, and we really rooted for the Brooklyn Dodgers and did not root for the New York Yankees. And I remember being in junior high school the day the Dodgers finally beat the Yankees and won the World Series. The whole place erupted. It was very interesting. On the other side of the family, my my mother ran a boarding house in Bearsville, which is a very small community in the Catskill Mountains, about 3 miles outside of Woodstock, New York. The town had a general store and a bakery with a dog. Thank heavens the dog was on a leash because it scared the living daylights out of me. It would run at you, and as long as you were away from it enough that the leash couldn't get to you, you were fine. If not, the dog would be very friendly and jump up and lick you and all that sort of stuff. And I couldn't stand that sort of thing. What would happen as I got older, I would walk the mile down to the store. And I mean down, because it was all downhill to the store. And it would be fine if somebody came to pick you up to go up. But if not, you walked up the whole way home. The house was not winterized. So Grandma ran it as a boarding house from late spring through October. It had a fireplace and an iron stove. I was going to say pot-bellied stove, but it wasn't a pot-bellied stove. It was a cylinder. And you put wood in it, and sometimes they put coal in it. But they could burn it up to Thanksgiving, and then we closed it up. That was the only heat in the place. So when you went upstairs to go to bed, it was a little cold. They eventually got rid of that and put a furnace in the basement and a large grate on the floor. Again, that being the only heat for the house. In the summers, I enjoyed picking wild berries from the field and swimming in a neighbor swimming pool. The summer between my junior and senior year in high school, I got a job working in Woodstock. This was the first time I had met local high schoolers. I started dating Paul Greenberg. Paul Greenberg had a couple of friends, and one of them was David Friedman. One of them was also Ira Deutsch, who ultimately became the first oboist in the Boston Symphony. But Ira was away that summer, so his girlfriend, Mary, and David joined us for lots of things. I remember the four of us going to Tanglewood to hear Beethoven's Ninth, which has always been one of my favorites to this day. Summer came and I went back to Erasmus Hall High School to finish my senior year. Paul went off to the Bronx campus of NYU as a freshman, and David went off to Union College as a freshman. Paul very quickly did not want to deal with a high school girlfriend. He was in college and that wasn't the thing to do. In June, I graduated, and this was the last formal graduation of mine that I've been to. I got a summer job in New York City and went up to Bearsville on the weekends. By that time, Grandma did not run it as a boarding house, but we used it as a family getaway. I found myself at a midnight Pete Seeger concert with the usual college kids from town, Mary, Ira, Paul, David. And David asked me if he could take me home. I said yes, and the rest is history. On our first date, the following Saturday, I got home at 3:45 a.m. My father was furious. I don't think he ever believed what I had said. We hadn't kissed, we hadn't held hands, we spent the whole time talking about religion. Speaking of religion, my family was what I call cultural Jews. When a boy was born, there was a bris. He would get bar mitzvahed at 13. A rabbi would do the wedding and officiate at the funeral. Other than that, it was nothing. If you went out of the house on Jewish holidays, especially Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you were dressed up. I don't remember anybody going to temple except maybe my maternal grandmother, and she may have gone to temple a few times on high holy days. The only thing religious I remember was on the anniversary of relative's death, she would light a particular candle. We would always go to their apartment for dinner at the start of Jewish holidays. For Passover, we would start with matzo ball soup and end with a matzah charlotte for dessert. That was sort of a pudding. In the middle, it was prime ribs of beef. The first and only Seder I have been to was the one that Lou Ward Baker did at the First Unitarian Church. I grew up in the Flatbush section of Brooklyn, and the majority of students in PS 139, where I went, were Jewish. The teachers found that at least 75% of their students were absent on Jewish holidays. More than once, I remember a teacher wondering why a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl with the last name of Rowland, Rowland, was staying home on Jewish holidays. My father's last name was originally Rosenwald. He grew up in a house without any religious identity, even though they considered themselves Jews, and they were. After high school, he studied mechanical engineering at Cooper Union in New York City and came to realize that as a Jew, he could not get a job as an engineer in New York City if he was identified as a Jew. So he changed his name from Rosenwald to Roland. I knew the most about Jewish holidays from my fourth grade teacher, who ended up doing something he'd probably be shot for now. For each Jewish holiday, he read us the history of that holiday. We also sang Christmas carols in December. and for a time I went to a Reform temple on some holidays. When I started dating, my grandmother would ask, "What's his name?" I started out saying John, she would sternly say, "John what?" When I said it was David, she relaxed and said, "David what?" When I said Friedman, she smiled and was pleased. He had the key. He may have been a louse, but he had the entrance key, and that was fine. As long as it was a Jewish boy, that was okay. My maternal grandparents had emigrated from Germany in the late 1800s. I know there was at least one trip back there to see family, probably in the 1920s. I did not hear any talk of the Holocaust, even though I am sure family members did not survive. Germany or Germans were talked about in such a way that was a positive way, and I was ignorant of what happened in World War II till the history classes I took got to it. I will get back to religion later. After high school, I went to Brooklyn College. David and I started dating the summer before my freshman year, and we continued to do so. He graduated from Union and started grad school at the U of R. We realized we could not get married until both of us had a bachelor's degree. He was a year ahead of me, so between summer school courses and extra courses during semesters, I finished in 3.5 years. That was a time when the fall semester didn't end before Christmas, but ended in the middle of January. At Brooklyn, if you were passing the courses you took in the last semester, and if none of those courses were required courses, you did not have to take finals. So we were married in late December, drove from New York City to Rochester, and then I went back to Brooklyn and finished college. In my last semester, I took a course that really turned me on, and that was genetics. I started graduate school at the U of R and ended with a doctorate in biology. My thesis involved biochemical description of gene function. Subsequently, I did research and taught various courses in biology. Lisa was born in December of '69 and Tanya in February of '72. The girls went to a Montessori school in Irondequoit, and Lisa became friends with a girl whose mother was from a Christian background and father from a Jewish one. We would gather for dinner during Hanukkah, play with dreidels, and eat latkes, potato pancakes. This lasted through high school. The girls didn't have anything else much religious-wise. We lived in Greece within walking distance of a Catholic school in a conservative parish, so many of the kids the girls played with went to that school. The girls would come home and say, "We don't believe this, do we?" And David and I decided rather than saying just no, it would be better to do something positive. So I went to talk with several Reform temples. I called up one and said I wanted to make an appointment to talk with somebody about religious education. He replied that wasn't necessary, we could talk on the phone. I asked if they discussed any other religious points of view. I was thinking in that question, non-Judaic points of view. He replied that they were a Reformed temple and did not discuss conservative or Orthodox Judaism. I figured if that was the only way he could interpret that question, maybe I'd talk to somebody else. So I called another one, and they were very happy to have somebody to make an appointment with me. So I went in to discuss the religious education program. When I arrived, I got a distinct impression that he was disappointed that the gentleman of the house was not joining us. Their program involved dropping the girls off for RE at a time different from the adult service. So there would be no connection religiously between what the kids did or what we did. At that time, David worked for Don Fader at Kodak. And Don kept trying to get us to go on the annual First Unitarian Ski Week. That in 75, it was in Stowe, New York. We talked my mother into coming up to look for the girls for a week and went to Stowe with them in March of 75. We already knew some of the other people on the trip. Dick Gilbert and family were there. The group seemed like a nice group of people. And after talking a little bit about religion, we enrolled the kids in RE in the fall of 75. We liked the fact that there was a family service where all four of us could attend together and then split into RE and church service. At that point in time, there was really no regular new member program. The book was open to sign the second Sunday of every month, and we signed it in October of 75. I think the same time as Vicki and Dick did. We have obviously been there ever since. Monday night of May 1981 was a life-changing night for me. I think I can get through this discussion okay. I certainly could not get through this discussion 20 years ago. David and the girls went over to St. Bernard Seminary to help with the organ transplant. The seminary was closing. The church had bought the organ, and the girls and David were helping transport parts of the organ from St. Bernard's to the church. I went off to teach the summer school course in genetics. According to the police report on the way home, my car was demolished by a high school senior who had too much beer to drink. I suffered what's called a cerebral contusion. If you had a contusion on your arm, you would say it was a black and blue mark. I don't remember 4 or 5 days before that Monday or 4.5 weeks after. So if I talk about anything that happened within that time framework, it's because I remember it from other people. I went to RGH for 5 weeks, and then I went to Monroe Community Hospital for 4, because my entire right side was not functioning. So I had to go through learning to walk again and using my right arm. It got to the point where I learned to write, and you could read my writing. It was very, very nice. Matter of fact, banks would not question my checks because you could honestly read my handwriting. And finally, I got back to the scribble that is Linda Friedman, and you can't read it, which the banks would accept. However, one of the things that got my mind working and my writing okay was my love of crossword puzzles. And I would really try to sit down and do crossword puzzles because that helped my writing and got my mind to working again. Over the almost 40 years since that time, I have made some observations. When you regain consciousness, you're not in the present day. I have been told I was talking about things I did in the mid-1950s and gradually went through the years until I got up to the present day. Although it took 5 days to get to the present day, I knew David was not visiting me, and I kept wanting to ask where he was. It turned out he had a reasonably serious medical problem, and he had been taken to Strong. So what my parents would do is come and visit me in the morning in RGH, go to visit him in Strong, then reverse the process in the late afternoon or evening. The church community was very kind and delivered meals, much like I think you're doing with Will. And I think that was one of the things that perhaps impressed Lisa enough that she took up the ministry later on. Things have gotten better over the years, but I have made several observations. As I said, I could not discuss this event 20 years ago. I have learned to take an aisle seat at a concert or a performance because I don't know if I have to get up and leave all of a sudden. For instance, I remember going to see Cyrano de Bergerac someplace, and something in that particular play got to me emotionally, and I just left. I find it very difficult at times that my emotional reaction is crying when other people might be laughing. So those wires are mixed up. I also left Jeever several times when the characters were wheeled around in a wheelchair. I remember one in a wheelchair due to an automobile accident, and I was out of my seat into the lobby very quickly. I also am on an aisle seat if something loud occurs, like going to the RPO and they're playing something smooth, soothing and low. And then all of a sudden, the trumpets start playing loud. What will happen is, because the reflexes on my right side are still hyperactive, my hand will go up and my leg will go out. So I want to make sure that if I'm sitting next to somebody and that happens, the person I'm sitting next to is David, not somebody else. That also happened in going to see one of Shakespeare's plays, one of the Kings, and they were in a particular scene where there was a discussion between several noblemen, and there was it was suddenly a shot in the background, and that again created that reaction. I also get frustrated that the part of the brain that remembers things about the person and the part that remembers the name must be different. Lots of times I can tell you what the person looks like, or if I'm meaning what the person looks like, things they have done, the context I know of them, but you want me to know their name? You're out of luck. This happens too at times when I meet people. Give me a couple of hours or a couple of days, and the name pops in my head, and I know what it is, which tells me that the sections of the brain that remembers those things must be different. At the beginning, and even now, to some extent, but nowhere near as much as at the beginning, I was frustrated in my inability to successfully anticipate what would happen under certain conditions. In 1981, I was the church moderator. And at the September Social Responsibility congregational meeting, I knew that one of the task forces going to be presented was a proposal for a group to be formed, which just looked into anti-drunk driving activities. I know what was the impetus of it because the guy who demolished my car was drunk. I had no problems talking about it to Nancy beforehand. I had no problems talking about it to other people beforehand. I remember telling them that I would support them, but I didn't think I could necessarily do anything with them. When I started introducing Nancy at the Social Responsibility Committee meeting, I totally broke down. I couldn't do anything about that. I just remembered leaving the stage very quickly and going to the ladies' room. And this frustrated David and Dick Gilbert because it was the ladies' room. Kitsy Russell was around and she came to help. And I regained composure reasonably quickly and went back to run the meeting. The real lasting problem is that in 1995, David noticed I had periods of staring into space. All sorts of studies were done, like CAT scans and MRIs. Nothing was found, but given David's description, I was put on anti-seizure medication, which controlled everything to 2013. After 3 episodes and medication changes, all appears at the moment to be under control. The really sad thing about it is that before a seizure, I feel very, very calm and very peaceful. And then all hell breaks loose. The most discouraging thing about that was I was at a lecture at the U of R. I don't remember the subject. I know at least one of the presenters was a neurologist. After the talk, I went up to ask him if a person had a cerebral contusion that led to permanent brain damage shown by hyperactive reflexes, why did seizures develop over time? And he unfortunately said, well, the problem is the neural tissue involved is not destroyed. It just doesn't function and it gives off random electrical signals, i.e., you end up having seizures. After I retired, I went back to doing something I tried in 1971, and that was throwing pots on the wheel. I did not know if it was possible because one arm was stronger than the other, and I didn't know if I could compensate. Fortunately, I can, and thank heavens I can. Gives me something to do. Okay, I brought you up to the current day. I don't know what else is in the future. I'm done.
Oh, Linda, I have known you so long and I knew so little of your life. Thank you so much. I'm going to open this up for questions. I'm going to take you off the spotlight.